watching in or watching the recording afterwards, you'll hear a lot from me. I'm Andrew Garrett, Councillor Andrew Garrett, the chair of the committee, and I'm joined by other members of the committee who are councillors and officers of the council and a cabinet member. Before we move on to the formal agenda, just to say that at present, I don't believe there has been a planned fire drill, so that may yet happen this morning. So we may have to have in mind that we may need to treat it either as a fire drill or as a real alert, probably the better thing, unless it's obvious. And as a real emergency, then that would mean evacuating the building via the nearest safe escape route, which is through the doors in front of me, down the stairs to our left as we leave the council chamber, and exit the door at the back of the building, walk across the inner car park to the evacuation point, which is the pavement opposite the police station. Reminder, of course, that lifts can't be used in the event of an emergency and that we should not re-enter the building until we're advised it's safe to do so by a member of staff. So have that in mind. Thank you. Otherwise, we can now move on to the formal agenda. Apologies and changes in membership. I have been advised of a probable change in membership, from that Councillor Jarman is to be substituted by Councillor Spink, according to a message that I had from Councillor Jarman last night. So we will see if Councillor Spink is able to make it this morning. Have we had any other apologies? Not.
None that I'm aware of, Chairman.
Thank you. I am aware that Councillor Critchison is on other council related business today, so that would case. Okay, the next item is the minutes of the previous meeting. For those who were present last time, are you satisfied that they are a correct record, or do you have matter arise? You do. You're satisfied. Yes. Anybody have any corrections before I take that as satisfaction? No, in which case I'll initial and then sign. Yeah. Bottom of the page. For my own initials. Colleagues, any declarations of interest to make? Councillor Churchman. Any others wishing to declare any interest? Of course, if anything does occur to you, just pipe up at the appropriate moment. Thank you. Okay, so move to item 4, which is public question time. Have there been any written questions?
None been received, Chairman.
Thank you. And I cannot see anybody in the public gallery, so I will assume there are no public questions then today. We're making very good progress so far at this rate. So, but we're into the meat of the agenda now. So the first of those is reports from our external auditor, from Ernst & Young, a verbal update first, and then the report on the Isle of Wight Pension Fund or external audit plan, which is a written report. And we have Jason James. Good morning, Jason.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning, everyone. Chair, can I just check? It says my video has been disabled. Can members see me on screen?
I can certainly see you. My hearing itself is dulled today, so if you're able to adjust your microphone or definitely speak up more into your microphone, that would be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, so the first update is just a verbal one, as we're not able to issue an audit plan for 22-23 as yet for the council, as there's still uncertainty around the scope of the 22-23 local government audits. At the last meeting, we mentioned we were awaiting or expecting a ministerial announcement at the end of September, early October. So that hasn't materialized. There's been a cabinet reshuffle since as well. So we're still not sure when that guidance is going to be released. Hence, we're not in a position to issue an audit plan yet. What we do know is that the value for money audits still goes ahead, as well as the pension fund audits. So those are not affected, and those audits are already underway. When the announcement is released, we expect that announcement to have a backstop date of the end of March for any 22-23 audits or any earlier ones that are still open. And the guidance is then supposed to clarify how we report on those audits, which we will then have a complete reset for 23-24 to allow us to get back on track because of all the audit backlogs, and then working to possibly end of September deadline or potentially end of December, but the guidance will make that clear, and that allows us then to get back on track and into a normal audit cycle from 23-24 going forward. So yeah, I just thought it would be worth giving members that briefing. But that's all I wanted to say on the council, and happy to take any questions on that one, Chair, before I move on.
Thank you for that, colleagues. Any questions on that verbal update? Obviously, we are hoping that everything will become clear, so that, as you say, we can be on track for those matters. But if there are no questions, then can I invite you, Mr. Jones, to highlight anything from item on the Isle of Wight pension fund side of things?
Yeah, sure, certainly, Chair.
Which is
Thank
a
you.
written report, of course.
Yeah. So the report in front of you, which is our second item, is the audit plan for the pension fund for the 22-23 audit. If I can draw members' attention to page 15, where we have 3 risk areas. The first one is the misstatement due to fraud and error, which we recognize on every audit. And the auditing standards require us to consider this as a fraud risk. So you'll see it on every audit that we do. And it's just to recognize the potential for management to override controls in order to report a more favorable position. But we've not identified anything specific for the pension fund. The next one down is the valuation of level 3 investments. So the Isle of Wight pension fund has investments in private debt and infrastructure. That's for the last 2 years now. And these are typically hard to value and based on unobservable inputs. So we deem the valuation of these investments to be a significant risk to our audit. And then thirdly is the risk of IAS 26 disclosures. So these disclosures contain significant assumptions and estimation techniques. So it's inherently risky in nature. Things like salary increases, discount rates, mortality rates, and all of those assumptions come with significant estimation uncertainty. And hence we recognize that as a risk for us in terms of the pension fund disclosures. And the way we address this risk is to involve our internal pension specialists, and they give us assurance over these disclosures. So those are the risks for the pension fund that we've identified. It's similar to previous years, Chair. There isn't nothing new. And then section 2 contains the procedures we will perform to address those risks. If I can move on to page 24, which is our materiality calculation. So same basis as previous year, it's based on 1% of the pension fund's net assets. So that gives us a planning materiality of roughly 6.9 million. And any errors above that level will be deemed a material misstatement. However, we do report any errors above our audit differences threshold, which is 346K. We report to the audit committee. If I then can move members on to page 27, which is a new section for this year. That is ISA 315. So this auditing standard has been revised and applies for the first time in 22-23 to the pension fund. and it relates to the design and effectiveness of internal controls and what impact these have on our risk assessment. So, Chair, we follow a fully substantive approach where we don't rely on controls, but the auditing standard requires us to gain an understanding of the controls and the design and implementation thereof to inform our risk assessment. And that includes IT controls, but we don't test the operating effectiveness. So it doesn't change our approach in any way. It's just to inform our risk assessment. Chair, that's all I was going to say on the audit plan, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, Mr. Jones. Colleagues, any questions for Mr. Jones on this audit plan for the pension fund? Councillor Quirk.
Just a comment that it all looks to be in order and progressing. We don't hear of any the results until March, so it's you know, everything appears to be set out to do the right thing, but there's nothing really to make a decision on other than to approve the fact that it looks okay.
Yes, thank you for that. One question I will ask of Mr. Jones. I raised this with you last week in our one-to-one discussion.
Yeah.
But I think it's worth drawing out, partly because there is increasing awareness of the use of automated software tools to inspect all sorts of things and make decisions and highlight things.
Yeah.
So I'm not suggesting that this is one of those cases where the artificial intelligence is going to take over, but I think it is important, particularly those who've been following the postmasters and mistresses case, that software can make mistakes, and I just think it would be good to invite you in public session to comment on the assurance that you have and the measures you take to make sure that automated software approaches do actually deliver sensible results. It's so easy, isn't it, to just trust the computer because the computer says yes or no.
Yeah. Fair point, Chair. So we do use automated techniques and software. I wouldn't say artificial intelligence up to that point at this stage. So we use automated techniques to cover full populations of your journals and your financial data. Whereas in the past we would take a random sample, for example, so we cover only a portion. Whereas with the automated software, we cover the full population, but that would still require some human intervention in terms of anything that's flagged as potential error or potential unusual movements. We will follow up and investigate to see if it is in fact something of interest to us as the auditors. But there are AI software programs on the horizon, and UI is rolling some of those out internally, but we've not adopted any of those yet, but that's likely to change in the future.
Thank you for that. So at the moment we're automatic but not intelligent. But
Yeah.
there's a possibility.
Yeah,
of
it's a good
intelligence.
summary.
But
Yeah.
in all of this, there is human oversight and human control and assurance on that, and I think that's really important. Yes, but certainly it's interesting that AI is on the horizon in your area as much as it seems to be in everybody's areas.
Yep.
And, we need to be alive to the fact that whilst it could well be a force for good, it can also produce not so good outcomes as well. But otherwise, colleagues, I think we're assured that this is a sensible plan, complete, doing all the right things. So I think we can thank Mr. Jones for his attendance and presentation, unless you have any further comments or questions. No, you're free.
Thank you, Chair.
Are you going to stay online for the rest of the?
Yeah, I'll stay online. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Right.
So that allows us to move to Item 6, which is the internal audit progress report. We have the Chief Internal Auditor's paper report, but I'll invite her to highlight anything in particular from that report.
Thank you, Chair. This report is the usual format progress report with any activities that we have performed and concluded since the last reporting period. There is nothing of significant concern in any of the results that are presented in front of you today. We are on track to complete the work as described on page 58 with the stats. And Chair, beyond that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions on this report? Just scrolling through, so bear with me. This is the problem with doing everything online on computers. It does sometimes take a moment. So I think obviously the one thing to have noted is that there is one element of high risk, is there not, in the fleet management side of things, but I'm sure members have noted that. But I was just looking for the commentary there. That it was it was looking at things over the longer term. I think if you might just want to comment a bit more on what you would see as the key areas there.
Thank you, Chair. So if you think about the strategic fleet, if you think about things operationally, so that's looking 12 months ahead, we had plenty of evidence to show consultation with various service areas and thinking about what their fleet needs were going to be in the next 12 months. What we didn't see any evidence of is planning ahead. So that's 2 to 5 years. So the high risk finding is solely in relation to the strategic elements, looking further ahead 3 to 5 years. We've had feedback from the audit that they're already starting to engage with service areas with this planning cycle for 24, 25 to how they can plan further ahead.
That's great, thank you. I just thought it was worth highlighting that one area. But colleagues, any other questions on this? It seems a pretty clean sheet this time around. They always are, but you know what I mean in terms of highlighting particular issues. But otherwise, shall we receive and note that report? Councillor Quirk.
I mean, the reports, the areas reported on in this one all look to be low risk and going well. When you look at the circle of how much is done, there's still a big chunk to be done during the rest of the year, and it's what's lurking in there that one wonders about.
You will be eagerly awaiting our meeting then in, is it not, March next year? So, but otherwise, I shall take it, colleagues, that we've received and noted the Chief Internal Auditor's report, and thank you. Which takes us to item 7, which is the Fraud, Irregularity and Whistleblowing Annual Report. Again, the Chief Internal Auditor, anything you wish to specifically highlight to us from that?
Chair, I think it is worth just narrating that on an annual basis, obviously this report comes to you, and it's important that you know the counter fraud work that has gone on behind the scenes. I need to stress that when cases are in progress, there is very limited information that can be shared with you, which is hence why perhaps within the report there are some lighter detail. Beyond that, I'm happy to answer any specific questions regarding our activities across the year.
Thank you for that. And certainly when I read through it, it highlighted to me that activity did take place and action, there were consequences for those who were found to have committed a fraud, and that is within the paper. But colleagues, questions or comments on this paper? Councillor Redrup.
How many fraud cases are we talking about?
They are contained within the paper, and fraud specifically, there are three elements to a potential fraud. And very often, if we're investigating, we will actually slot it under whichever potential criminal offence it is. So we haven't noted any as being true frauds. What we have noted is that there were thefts because it was more relevant to the Theft Act for 4 cases. For the joint working and council tax cases, again, technically, if we were to prosecute, we may look to prosecute under the Fraud Act, but we would have investigated them as being areas of concern, but not wholeheartedly treated them as being fraud. We tend to get to that stage if we're looking for a prosecution. Does that?
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And certainly the niceties of which acts you might take action under, it's very, very important. So what we might colloquially describe in one way, actually, when it comes to the law, we have to describe in very specific ways. I've begun to really appreciate in my time here in this chair. So colleagues, any other questions or comments? Otherwise, I think this, but to me, this assures me that we do have these processes in place, that they are robust, they do lead to appropriate actions at the end. Councillor Luciani.
I just want to, I need to do a declaration of interest because it says direct payments in there and I am a PA, so I actually get a direct payment.
No problem. Any other questions or comments? In which case we'll receive and note that report. Thank you very much. And move us on to item 8, which is the procurement half-yearly report, which is at page 71 in the pack onwards. Who is it? Sorry. Oh, there's Alice.
Good morning, Chair. It's
2 people coming up on screen. Good morning.
good morning. I'll be leading on this. My colleague Leslie Kinnear, who is the new permanent procurement team leader, is here to observe today. But I prepared the report, have been in post in the interim role for 6 months. So the report is to present the procurement half-yearly activity to the committee. It summarises activity over the first 2 quarters of the current financial year 2023-24. I won't go into all of it. I'll just draw out some highlights. The number of awarded contracts is lower in comparison to the same period of the last year. Having done a review of the activity, I don't believe that actually indicates an overall drop. I think it's purely a product of the timelines for various procurements that were undertaken, and therefore fewer concluded in those first 2 months. And therefore proceeded to final contract. It was purely a timing matter. We have seen an improvement on the number of waivers, which is positive. This has been a result of ongoing work with various service areas to ensure that procurement requirements are notified as far as possible up front, and we avoid anything being required to be waived in terms of contract standing orders. We do still have a number of health social care placements. Often these become waivers, and unavoidably the decision to place a service user into a particular facility is often either decided by others and not always notified to the council in time for us to put the documentation in place soon enough. However, again, we have seen an improvement overall in that. Additionally, some of those we can't compete anyway because of the nature of the service user needs and the type of facility they need to receive care in. The focus on the procurement strategy has been lower than we had hoped over the past period. We've had a number of resourcing changes across the team. We have made some progress in particular one area, which is the Climate and Sustainability Impact Assessment Tool, or I think people otherwise refer to it as the wheel. This we have now, in conjunction with colleagues in the climate and sustainability and community wealth building teams, being able to introduce that, incorporate that, apologies, into the procurement initiation form, which we use at the very start of a procurement process. And this will help us and help the service areas across the council identify at an early stage what opportunities there are for each individual procurement to contribute to those overall objectives around environmental impact and community wealth building. So we haven't made as much progress as we'd hoped from a strategy perspective, but like I say, we have got a new team leader in post now. You know, we're in a position of rebuilding the team and moving forward. That was all I was going to draw out, Chair. If there's any questions, please, happy to take them.
Thank you for that. The report is also in the name of Councillor Bacon, who is present today. So I'm just going to invite him to comment if he wishes. I'm sure he would wish to on the report as well.
Thank you, Chair. It is very much an operational report, so my comments are minimal. I would just highlight what Alistair said about the introduction of the wheel, which is producing, yes, what's the formal term? Impact assessment 12. So if you call it the wheel, it sounds a bit like an instrument of torture, and it's far from that. It's having spoken to various officers around council, it is proving a very great help, and in particular, my only comment relates to the procurement strategy. Of course, we have the 4 key themes, the first 2 of which are local community wealth building and climate and environment, and the wheel very much is assisting the focus on those features. So it's good to see it come into use. Otherwise, I'd have no comment.
I'm glad you highlighted that as well as the officer. It's certainly a welcome addition, I'm sure, to what this council is trying to achieve. Colleagues, do you have any questions or comments on the report? Just one thing I did know, there is a typo which I have now lost.
Sorry.
Where a figure is rendered as 1,7889 on page 82. It's not a particularly material thing, but you might want to look at correcting that in due course, as to which of what has become duplicated or otherwise there. I think
Thank you.
It also shows I read the report. But in general, I think we recognise, and we've recognised over some time, that the waivers that are necessary because of the urgencies in certain areas. Obviously, anything that can be done to anticipate what may happen is great. But I think I don't suppose there's a council in the country which has found itself capable of not having to have those arrangements in place. So that doesn't alarm me, but I certainly heard some comments about work towards minimising that exposure there. Colleagues, though, I think Councillor Quirk, you had a question or comment.
Yes, on table 5, as is normally the case, the number of waivers for children's services is very high, and predictably high, because it's emergency situations, you have to go in and deal with it. But we actually know that sort of thing's going to happen. And I just wonder if we have procedures in place to try and actually have short-term facility available locally, because a lot of these by necessity go off island because we've got to have it today. And that doesn't seem to be the best way to handle it.
Yeah, happy to respond to that. We do work with children's services closely to identify where they do require ongoing agreements, or whether short term or longer term in nature. So we do have those in place. When we look through this particular period, we were noticing they were placements. A lot of majority of them were mainland placements for facilities that we perhaps only require for one service user, and therefore I guess it's focusing our efforts in the areas where we're going to get most reward, and where we have ad hoc placements. As I said already, many of the times we don't know that they're going to be placed. It could be a decision from a court, for example, We don't know they're going to be placed in a particular mainland facility. But wherever we can, we are working with children's services officers to ensure that we have the right agreements in place for the providers that we feel we will need more frequently. Unfortunately, we can't put an agreement in place with all, particularly the mainland providers, because often we just don't know which ones we're going to need.
Thank you for that. Councillor Quirk, do you want to come back on that, or?
No, I mean, it's an unpredictable area, but it's an area where one feels we should have capacity to deal with it in the short term on the island as we look for long-term solutions. And actually ethically, putting large numbers of children off island, I think is unethical.
Well, colleagues, other questions on or comments on this report? Councillor Churchman.
It's a comment, really. The procuring contracts with all the stuff that's in place now, are we in fact delaying the actual implementation of works and things that need to be done? Because it seems that there is now so much bureaucracy surrounding just getting the contract in. And usually it's the people at the bottom of the scale who suffer. In other words, our poorer, more deprived people. And I would like to know, in fact, if it's possible, I'm looking at Colin, to have an idea of how long roughly it takes to procure a contract. Now, I mean, all right, how long is a piece of string? But even so, you must have some idea of the work involved, the officer time involved, all the paperwork. And I wonder whether sometimes we're self-defeating in trying to add all these things in to be eco-friendly. And in fact, A, we're not being eco-friendly because of all the extra work. And secondly, we actually don't deliver. Thank you.
So the Chief Executive wishes to comment.
If I may, Chairman, thank you. You have made a really good point, Councillor Churchman, but I think there are two things about procurement processes. One is they're set by regulation and good governance, and as a local authority, we should be following good governance, and we are. But more importantly, procurement shouldn't be seen as a way of delaying making decisions. It should be part of the way we plan for activity as a matter of course. And of course, any contract that we let will depend on what the contract is for. So there will be some types of contract for very high values, which have to comply with timescales set out in regulations. And we are not at liberty to change that. Equally, our procurement process, as Alice, I'm sure, will be able to confirm, for lower value contracts is quite a short process and is able to happen relatively quickly. But I'll allow Alice to comment on the detail of that if she would like to. Thank you.
Yeah, just to add to the Chief Executive's comments there, yes, and it isn't just how long's a piece of string. It very much depends on the nature and complexity. So for the lower value procurements, we procurement team don't get involved below a certain threshold. We're here for advice, clearly, but officers are able to do an amount directly with advice from us if they require it, above a certain threshold and up to our procurement regulations thresholds. We do aim to procure as quickly as we can, obviously working with the officers for the relevant areas, obviously ensuring that we don't rush the process and have appropriate checks and balances, but we're conscious as well that the requirement needs to be procured as efficiently and as quickly as we can, whilst ensuring we meet all the requirements, both of our procurement legislation, but also other legislation such as health and safety, financial checks, etc. So we are conscious and aware that processes like this can be perceived as bureaucratic, but we do try with the way we interface with our service, with the service areas and the relevant officers, to ensure it is as smooth as possible. And if anybody obviously has any questions or queries on the timelines, we're happy to work that up with them individually on each procurement.
Councillor Bacon first.
Thank you. Just on the strategic side of things, obviously we have the newish procurement strategy, and certainly the aim behind that, or one of the key aims behind that, is to rationalise the process. One has to have regard to the corporate priorities, and so there is a balance between all those things. But of course, I would highlight again the first of those key themes in the strategy, which is local community wealth building. We could perhaps make an easier process, but if we want to disregard such things, then that's where the balance lies. Certainly the strategic view at the moment is that that is a key thing, and maybe that adds a little to the process sometimes, but on balance, one has to take a balanced view and try and get the best. But overall, the aim was to rationalise the process and simplify as far as possible. It's public procurement. It's never going to be easy.
Thank you. Mr. Rowland, I think you had your hand up.
Is it working? Yes. Just briefly on Councillor Churchman's point, yeah, there are lots of things we have to comply with, and it's part of being a public body. However, what I would say is I think good procurement is good project management practice. And therefore, if you are looking to make sure that you are covering the issues you need to cover with in terms of environmental sustainability, or in terms of good procurement practice or equalities, etc., it's a good thing to follow in order to make sure that we're actually delivering a project properly. We have got things like frameworks as well. So any large projects, we are actually engaging in frameworks. For example, large highways projects or regeneration projects, we don't necessarily have to go through a full procurement process every time. We can call off on a framework, which makes life a lot easier to do that. We do use waivers, but then there are exceptions, and we make sure that we cover those exceptions when we're looking at a waiver process. So yes, it's never ideal, but it's good project management practice in my view, and therefore I would support whatever we need to do in the public sense.
Thank you for that. Do you wish to come back on that?
Could I just say, project management is possibly part of, well, certainly the major part of it. I can think of things the island have done where there has not been a project manager in place, and that is where we have. So, but I like the idea of a sort of framework, which isn't too rigid, but gives an outline of how. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other colleague wish to comment or question on this report? In which case we will receive and note it.
Thank you.
Move us. So item 9 is the Treasury management report for Q2. Joe Cook, I think this is with you. Anything you wish to highlight to us?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to go through the report because I'm assuming you've all thoroughly enjoyed reading it. It's just a couple of items I just want to highlight. If I could call your attention to table 2 on page 114 of the pack. There's an item listed there where we have a LOBO loan, which is a lender's option, borrower's option loan. This is a loan that the holder of the document, so in that case, Commerce Bank, has the option at set dates to tell us that the interest rate will increase. We received a notification from Commerce Bank on the 20th that the rate would increase on the 23rd of November. And at that point, we have the option. We can either accept the increase, and therefore the rate would go from 4.27 to 5.81%, or we could repay the loan. We consulted with Section 151 and Director of Finance, and it was decided that we would repay the loan. we did not need to take any additional borrowing out to cover this, as we had funds sitting in our money market funds. And overall, this will constitute a saving of about 76,000 for the remainder of this year, with the interest that has yet to be charged. So so when you get the report next year, that will have a 0 against it. The other thing I just want to sort of highlight is the ongoing saga of the interest rate situation. We received an update from Arlene Close, our investment advisors, on the 7th of November, at which time they indicated they did not expect rates to fall until September 24. However, this morning, this is very hot off the press, a notification came round that the CBI themselves have predicted that rates are not likely to fall until 2026. So, but market speculation is that they will start to decline at some points before then. So really it's a case of, we're just going to keep watching this space, and hopefully we'll get some joy on the interest rate front. Just for your information, the current rate is 5.25%. This is the base rate, and versus 4.25% at the end of March this year, and 2.25% September last year. So we've gone up 3% in 12 months. Treasury, the other thing I just want to emphasise is that Treasury management activity is continuing to contribute to the budget savings position of the council. And as at the end of September, we had managed to provide a net saving of 1.8 million. This is despite the rates going up. A lot of our loans are actually fixed. We have very few short-term loans, so the actual change in rates has not had a huge amount of effect on the amount we're paying out. And we've also had slightly more income than we anticipated, so we've managed to generate some additional savings on that, additional income rather than savings. That's all I have to comment at this point.
And those comments are very welcome. It shows the importance of Treasury management, the work that is done in that area. So we are grateful, and I'm sure the council taxpayers of the Isle of Wight are grateful that particularly that savings are being made to offset the other pressures in the budget. Yes, interest rates are high, but I think that we're moving to a point where there's going to be stability again, rather than rates going up. And I do myself remind myself from time to time that historically we're back to where rates tended to be until, of course, the financial crash of the late early 2000s, when things were, to some extent, that's what we should now be expecting. We're back to some form of historical normality. Although I'm sure all of us would personally and professionally and whatever like to see much lower rates. But anyway, colleagues, comments or questions on Ms. Cook's report? I don't see anybody. I think that's a vote of confidence in the work that is being done, and also of gratitude, like I said at the start. You probably joked about whether or not they were interesting. They are interesting. I do find it helpful to see the discussions about what's influencing the national and international picture. In the same way, actually, Councillor Churchman, I'm sure, would agree, when we had similar sorts of reports on Pension Fund Committee as well, about what's happening out there and how it affects us as a council and the delivery of service to the Isle of Wight. So don't be afraid to think of this as actually very interesting stuff. Thank you. Otherwise, we will receive and note your report and move on to item 10, which is the council's risks profile, which is at page 125 in the pack. Before I invite the Chief Executive just to comment on this, I just let colleagues know that having had a request out to the Chief Executive to observe her CMT discussing risk, that I did take part as an observer of that process a few weeks ago. And as I said to them online and subsequently talking to Thomas Pereira, and I'll say now, I was assured that our senior management team takes risk very seriously, that the discussions seem to be appropriate and at the appropriate level, and appropriately collegiate as well, that it wasn't just one person talking about one area. There was this cross talk between directors, making observations on that. So I'm grateful for that observation. I did say to the chief executive I would welcome being able to do so again at a future point in time. But otherwise, I'll invite the chief executive to make any comment on the risk profile. Actually, it should be Ms. Downer first, shouldn't it? So, but maybe I'll invite you, Ms. Downer, first, and then the chief executive. So sorry.
No problem. Thank you very much. You will note in the report any changes I made in italics, just so you can see them more clearly, and changes that were requested at the previous meeting being discussed and addressed within that report and within the appendix. As Councillor Garrett's already said, the use of the report and how it's addressed within our corporate management team has been observed. So thank you for that, Councillor Garrett. I don't believe there are many significant changes within the report. The Hampshire exit is within there in terms of specific actions being undertaken in relation to that risk. And as part of the conversation that we often have in CMT, there will be a review of a couple of the adult social care metrics for the next report, which we'll receive at the next audit committee. Those have already been done, but they're not in this actual report, so you'll see those then. I don't think there's anything else I need to draw your attention to, but if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Before I do that, I'll just invite the chief executive to comment if she wishes.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity, and also thank you for coming along to CMT, as I think it's very important that as a council we do provide you with the opportunity to gain assurance that these things are being considered by senior officers across the council. And of course, we have agreed to extend that invite for a 6-monthly review as well, so that you can be assured that that process is one that is ongoing. Just to add to what Mrs. Downer has said, in that it may well be that we also will have a review of the exit strategy for the Children's Partnership by the time that we meet as Audit and Governance again, because obviously things will have moved on considerably in time as well. So there's likely to be a review of that risk at a future meeting as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And am I right in thinking this is the one? This report now sees the removal of that strategic risk around how stable the council situation was. I am right in seeing, so that has now been removed and rolled into another strategic risk. It is something I followed up with. I had a meeting with various hats on with the chief executive, just to seek her further assurance that she felt that risk had diminished, and that we as councillors were doing what we should be doing to ensure a stable, if not, but still lively governance side of things. So colleagues, any questions or comments on this report? There is actually quite a lot in italics, so it does bear some very close reading. But questions, comments on this? Councillor Quirk.
At the last meeting, when we saw the quarterly results, there were significant pressures on both adult social care and children's services. And the Section 151 officer reported that mitigation processes were underway to try and resolve those and bring them back to avoid an ongoing deficit into future years. Are they having any effect, or are we still on the same projection?
we will pick that up. Chief Executive, perhaps start with.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I think it would be useful for this this detailed question to be referred to the Section 151 officer for a detailed answer. But in short, as we've talked about before, and as we've seen through discussion at Cabinet and Corporate Scrutiny on the Q2 quarterly performance management report, in-year budget management is something that the council does as a matter of course at its senior management team meetings and in line with our duties as a responsible council. There remain pressures in those areas, ongoing pressures in those areas, because we are seeing increases in demand, but we are mitigating those pressures through a variety of means. Some of which is about operational activity and the way we undertake our services, some of which is outlined in our budget strategy in terms of use of contingencies. And I refer to the COVID contingency, which we have in place to cover off some increases in demand as well. I think it's probably better for a more detailed answer to be provided via our Section 151 officer. Thank you.
That's the quote.
The 151 officer suggested that if we can control the overspends, it was possible to avoid a structural deficit. From what I can see, the way that we're dealing with the overspends is by use of reserves, which are finite, and if you can't use the reserves once they've gone. And it looks to me as if we're moving into a situation where there is a structural deficit. Would someone reassure me that that's not true?
That is an ongoing budget management matter, Councillor Quirk, and we will be in a position to provide an update on that after the end of the financial year and the local government financial settlement that comes out in December as well. So it's part of the ongoing work that we're undertaking. Of course, it remains the priority of the council to do everything we can to ensure that we're not in structural deficit at the end of the financial year, and that is part of the budget management strategy that this council currently has in place.
We'd all like to avoid a structural deficit. I think there's an element of wishful thinking here.
So obviously, I think that that'll be something that all members will be very much alive to, and certainly not a situation we'd want to see this council go back to. So I think this is obviously going to be something that in this committee, but in other places will be returned to. And of course, there is a whole budget process that we're all working towards in any case. Councillor Churchman.
Yes, it's in connection with falling school rolls and the fact that at the moment I haven't yet seen a plan of how we're going to deal with this. But what really worries me is where we have a school such as, I think Holy Cross is mentioned earlier in the report, and I can't remember, there were two schools, one in Cowes. Anyway, whilst their falling school roles are not being addressed, they are actually building debt. And make no mistake, that debt will come back onto the Isle of Wight Council. And I'm really, really concerned that nothing seems to be happening in this direction. Some hard decisions have got to be taken, but it isn't just a question of hard decisions. It's also a question of the fiscal problems that could be facing us over the next year. Thank you, Chair.
Invite comment on that. Councillor Bacon, do you wish to comment?
I could comment at very great length. I have made a very clear statement to say that there is an approach to this. I'm already in discussion with the new DCS, who will be starting in February. And while he cannot give much time at the moment, we certainly have meetings in the diary and outlining the process to be followed, the framework of which, as I say, I've set out very clearly. Deficit and debt is part of it, but I think we need to look more widely and have a clear 3-5 year plan, whatever it might be, to approach and deal with issues in our schools. A major contributing one as well is the current approach to SEND and the effect that that is having on all schools. I'm being very broad brush here. I'd be very happy to sit down with any councillor, as I've offered those who've emailed me, and discuss where we are and how we're going forward. But I would like to create the assurance, or give the assurance, that there is a clear timescale. There's a clear process where we will consult and engage with everyone over the coming term. We will have our outline plan, I hope, by Easter, and we have a timeline for implementation as well. But the thing is, this must be done properly and must not just be picking off 1 or 2 issues here and there, but looking at the entire issue with our education structure on the Isle of Wight. And that will take time. Any process, formal process one goes through will take time, but that has all been factored in to the outline I have set out. I hope that gives some reassurance.
Councillor Churchman, do you want to come back on that?
Time is of the essence, and in the meantime, the fiscal debt is building. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Quirk.
I'm just wondering that we've gone through a process with one set of officers, and are we expecting them to go through the process again with a different set of officers, give a different outcome?
Are you able to comment, Councillor Bacon?
We are going through a wider process. It obviously of necessity is with a new set of officers, because we are ending the partnership with Hampshire has been ended. So we have had to recruit 2 new senior roles and create our own Isle of Wight based oversight, strategic oversight of education. So the work that has already taken place will feed into that. But as I say, it's clear that to me that there are wider issues to be taken account of in what is done, including standards, and as I say, particularly including the impact, current impact of SEN on mainstream schools.
I may follow up on the comment you were making also, Councillor Bacon. You said you are in discussions with the incoming DCS on the way forward. Presumably that also includes ongoing talks with our current DCS as well to make sure that everything is seamless. And
well, yes, I mean, the discussions with Mr. Ashley are really about transferring over and how we seamlessly move from partnership to the Isle of Wight being in control, albeit with buying in certain elements of the service we've had over previous years, such as MASH and so on. So, as I say, the process is ongoing, seamless, if you like to use that word, but obviously the key work will be with the new team when that is in place, and appointments have already been made, of course.
thank you for that. I think obviously this is a discussion on the risk profile and the risk register. I think unless a colleague wishes to comment otherwise, I don't think this changes our discussion, changes our view on the appropriateness of the risk profile, and in terms of both what is recorded there. Obviously the educational matters are indeed part of the strategic risks, but I wouldn't want to second guess any of the actual values placed on those risks. But colleagues, you may think differently and may wish to the CMT to reevaluate some of that risk level, or do you feel it in terms of it's on their register, and has been appropriately assessed? But that's the clerk.
I think without early action, then the risk profile of the overspends by schools and their deficits is likely to be an increasing risk factor. So I think it's something that we should be keeping a close watch out for, because I think that is an area that is going to be under pressure and the risk is going to increase because the amounts of deficit are likely to increase.
That's helpful. And before I bring you back in, Councillor Bacon, I think, yes, March is our next meeting, is it not? That will be a few weeks after the new DCS is in post. I think that'd be a good place perhaps to have a slightly deeper dive around this. But I'll take Councillor Bacon, then I think the Chief Executive then after that.
I was dealing with things in a very broad brush way just now, but just to reassure Councillor Quirk, of course, if any school is currently in difficulty, that is a matter that is being addressed. I've certainly attended meetings at schools where there are issues, and there's very detailed consideration, guidance and assistance being offered to schools who feel they are in difficulty. The point I was making earlier is that sometimes that difficulty, there's a bigger picture to consider, which is going to be part of the planning process that goes ahead. But clearly, where there are issues at a school, then a team is going in and offering what assistance it can to help those schools.
Thank you. If I could ask the Chief Executive to comment, and maybe we can wrap up on this item.
Thank you, Chair. And just to provide yourself with that reassurance and assurance to this committee again, obviously the strategic risks relating to budget, particularly in year budget management and budget setting for the next few years, will be reviewed as a matter of course as we go through the remainder of the year. So we will pick up on those issues around pressures on services and debt from schools as well, as a matter of course as we go through the remainder of the year.
Thank you for that. Any further comment on this? Do we otherwise do we are we prepared to receive and approve in the usual way? I don't think I've heard anything to say that we would not at this stage. Probably brings relief to the Chief Executive and others on that. But is that agreed? Yes. Yeah. We do indeed receive and approve that. But I think the comments made will have been heard very much so there, and our next meeting in March, as I say, is where we can return to some of those issues. The next item on the agenda is just it's becoming a bit of it's a standing item. Consider, I should almost say, any verbal update from the chairman on review of the constitution. That item 12 has bearing upon this, and in the sense that any of the constitutional reviews are dependent on two things. Any major change overall, which might be prefigured in January's full council, and there's a report at item 12, but also those things that might still yet emerge around the whole planning side of things that's been ongoing. But I don't have anything otherwise to report through to you, but are there any matters that anybody wishes to raise upon Constitution at this time? Councillor Quirk.
I mean, the committee that's been looking at this is making recommendations to go into January. I think there is a recommendation for that group to continue to work with the monitoring officers to sort of implement it if that is approved at the January meeting. But I think everything's in line for it to be discussed at the January full council meeting.
So I'll roll in item 12 into what we're discussing at the moment. So as Councillor Quirk has outlined that. So item 12 is the report of the future governance working group. We're requested to note those recommendations. For council's wishes were pretty clear that it comes back to full council in January. The future governance working group has reported. It will be for every member to familiarise themselves with the contents of that report and any other material ahead of the decision to be made on the 17th of January in those terms. But otherwise, I think we can note the recommendations of the working group. Oh, Councillor Bacon, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if you'd indulge me for a second, as I was a member of the working party.
Of course.
But also I'm the cabinet member under whom changes would be overseen. And I think it's only right that I make a few points about concerns that have arisen in discussions that have arisen. Firstly, I'm concerned that the report does not reflect all the work undertaken and all the views expressed. In particular, a work stream that is referred to at paragraph 8 of cabinet-based alternatives to committees, that was abandoned during the course of the work. And I'm also concerned that obviously what happened was without any meaningful consultation. There's a reference to feedback from islanders at paragraph 12. I think, in fact, that was 4 emails were received in response to a media story. I did raise my concerns as part of the group, which, as I say, are not recorded in the report, but I do think they need to be set out here. I would say that at this stage, council can do no more than take an indicative or in principle vote or approach to a committee system. My concern, as I would have hoped would have been expressed in the report, that there's probably inadequate detail for even that to take place, and certainly no meaningful vote or definitive resolution can take place until there is sufficient detail. There has been some discussion in emails between councillors about the approach to scrutiny, and that is unclear and needs to be resolved. I note that there is Appendix 1 in the report, which highlights areas of work that are needed. Again, I think particular regard needs to be had to budgeting for a committee system. And of course, whether a scrutiny element is to be retained is key to that. And also the scheme of members' allowances, as the appendix refers to, needs to be rewritten. That work needs to take place before any meaningful vote can take place. It must be said there's a concern as to whether council can make any meaningful decision without knowing the financial impact, and those 2 elements are key. It also needs to be determined what scheme of delegation is going to operate. A committee system, I think the group recognised, will of necessity need to give more decision-making powers to officers so as to fill the gaps between committees. And that needs to be clear and clearly understood. And also the detail needs to be in place at the time of any meaningful decision, because as I understand it, there needs to be a formal public consultation following the meaningful vote. So that detail needs to be ready to go out to the public to comment at that point. Chair, I think it was made clear when this matter was originally discussed some time ago that audit would be part of the process. But the hope and I think intent of Cabinet was that audit would be able to consider the proposed new system and review its potential impact on council structures and decision taking, in particular finance. And obviously all that's happening today is a very thin report is being noted, and audit is not taking any view on that. I would have to say that anything that might have an impact on how the council operates, particularly in the current financial circumstances, needs to be carefully considered. And the hope would have been that audit would have had the material to do that, and that has not happened. This committee cannot at this stage say whether and what impact any change will make. So, as I say, Chair, thank you for indulging me, but I just feel it was necessary to say that there is a deep concern about the lack of detail at this stage and what we may be going into or not, whether it's a good idea or not. I was the one who abstained at the committee because I just feel that that cannot be said at the moment, and I would hope councillors would take note of that. Thank you, Chair.
Certainly, and I'm sure people have taken note of that. But Councillor Quirk, I'll bring you in.
I would just note that the final decision of the committee was unanimous at all of those members who were present, which I think was everyone apart from Councillor Bacon.
That was certainly the case. There will undoubtedly be concerns as to whatever decision this authority might make. I refer back though to the original motion, which was clear about the pathway being to a January full council resolution. So yes, it is good that it goes through this committee, but this committee should not be the arbiter of whether or not it proceeds. So, Councillor Luceni.
Just to be clear, I voted on that premise that it was going through to full council in January. I didn't necessarily take a view of whether I was going to vote for, abstain or no to it.
And I would come back to the remark I made earlier. It will be incumbent on every member of this council to familiarise themselves with that report, familiarise themselves with all of those changes that have been made to committee systems by councils over the last 11 years since they were able to do so under the Localism Act. There's plenty of material around the Local Government Act, Local Government Associations side of things. So there's plenty of material out there. I'm sure Councillor Brodie will want to highlight even more of that to people, but it will be a January full council decision. I hear, certainly as a member of that working group, I hear Councillor Bacon's concerns, and it is right that they are raised and addressed. But the point I would make is that they are addressed, and personally, I'm confident that they can be addressed. Should the council, of course, take an in-principle decision to move to a committee system? But Councillor Bacon, I'll indulge you one more time.
You used the word in principle, and that is fine and good. My point was that I think is all that can be achieved in January, because those matters that have been spoken to as are outlined in Appendix 1 absolutely must be addressed and understood before any meaningful decision can be taken. That's the point I wish to make in a nutshell. Thank you for allowing me to do that.
But otherwise, colleagues, are we content to note this report? And obviously, there will be minutes that outline that concerns and otherwise were expressed. So thank you for that. Means it moves us to item 13, which is our work plan. You have the work plan at page 165 onwards. I'll highlight one item on that work plan that in March you will receive bring it up. In March 24, one of the reports of great interest that will come to the council, to this committee, is the chair's annual report, I believe. What I'm thinking of doing this for next year is bringing the committee together in an informal session to discuss the work that we've been doing over the last year, so that that report can be informed not just from me as chair, but informed by colleagues as well, both in terms of reviewing of what we have done, but also to give us a direction to travel for the committee through the next municipal year. Another thing I am looking at, I've been meeting directly with our external auditors as recommended, that we have that. I want to see a way of extending that out so that the committee meets with our external auditors at least once a year as well, for that kind of candid discussion that we have. Certainly I've had that very valuable being to have those discussions. But otherwise, any comments on our work plan? Councillor Quirk.
If the council does agree in principle to move into the committee system in January, it might be worthwhile having an interim report on that from the monitoring officer or somebody at our March meeting, and definitely at the one following.
That's a very good point. We'll look at that. Thank you. Any other comments on our work plan? I'll move to item 14, which is members' question time. So I've received 5 questions. I've got 5 questions beforehand, but did you want something on that? I'll come to you after I've dealt with the 5 I've already received, if that's okay. So they are due for written written response as well, so they were received last week. I'll try to deal with them in the order that they are numbered. I believe the first one is the one from Councillor Jarman, isn't it? So how do you want me to proceed? They're quite lengthy questions. Shall I read them all out and then give my response? Yes. So from Councillor Jarman to the committee. So customer practices that I embody the committee for these purposes, but do comment otherwise if you wish. So under item 10, appendix 1, lack of financial resource and the ability to deliver the council's in-year budget strategy, the score is medium. As there are at least 2 full budget proposals and also a number of potential amendments in preparation, is this council confident of this assessment and that the resources are available to fully resource the work in progress? And my response was that on making inquiries, and I made these inquiries of the chief executive, that I have been assured that there is confidence in both the risk assessment and in the availability of those resources. So second question, so 1415 was from Councillor Adams. So how many disposals of council assets have occurred during this financial year? What is their aggregate value and how many and of what aggregate value have not been fully, open brackets, including value, terms, contract parties, etc., close brackets, publicly disclosed? And does this committee believe that hiding the terms of such disposals of council in brackets, that is public, close brackets, assets, is open and transparent? My response is this, and I make this response because, in personal terms, because I don't think that I can answer for the committee, because the committee has not debated these matters, and I'll make a comment on that afterwards. Under the current governance arrangements, decisions with regard to disposal and use of council assets sit with the cabinet. And I will pass this question through to the relevant cabinet member to provide a detailed response as to the number and value of disposals. On the general principle of openness and transparency, I would expect Isle of Wight Council to be operating in line with the government's local government transparency code, and I provide a link in the written response. I note also that the Local Government Association has published guidance and there is another link I won't read out. The code and guidance recognises the importance of disclosure of information to the public proactively and in response to inquiries. Both also recognise that information may be confidential and exempt, and that there is a statutory basis for non-disclosure. Once the cabinet member has provided a response, it will be appropriate for that to be published, and I would hope that somehow we could bring that back to committee in some way. But that was my response on that question. I then had a question from Councillor Medland in similar terms. How many financial settlements of disputes separately incoming and outgoing has this council made during this and the last financial year? What is their aggregate value per year? And how many and of what aggregate value have not been fully, open brackets, including value, terms, contract parties, etc., close brackets, publicly disclosed due to commercial confidentiality? Does this committee believe that refusal to disclose the terms of such financial settlements involving disputes, contract failures, etc., is open and transparent? Again, I respond personally because, of course, the committee has not debated these items and but may want to at some point take these to reach a formal view. So I note that there are 2 questions. The first question requests information, and I will ask the relevant cabinet member to provide a response. Discussions of past meetings of cabinet corporate scrutiny committee appear to be relevant to this question. I've reproduced the commentary around general principles of openness and transparency and both the government code and the LGA guidance. But I add to this, it may also help Councillor Medland to know that some time ago I discussed with both our external auditors, and as long as my memory is correct, our internal auditors as well, the statutory basis for the extent to which financial information relating to disputes or may be disclosed or not disclosed in the council's accounts. If it would be of assistance to Councillor Medland or to anybody, I would be happy to ask for a briefing note to be prepared. As an addendum, a verbal addendum to that, certainly our previous chief external auditor took me through some discussion on the statutory basis for disclosure or otherwise within accounts. But that was my response. I'll take Councillor Quirk there at this stage.
I think there's been ongoing levels of disquiet from members about the secrecy around some of the disposals and the money. I understand the confidentiality of individual contracts, but it would seem appropriate that this committee is giving some oversight to that. And I think maybe putting this onto our next meeting agenda would be worthwhile. It would, to me, would seem not unreasonable that the total disposals of lands to third parties to date is a total is disclosed, how much we've received rather than the individual amounts, and maybe compared to the total independent assessment of the land value at the time. The concern of people is, are we selling off, are we getting value for money? Are we selling off land cheap to developers because of, we're going to get a quick fix of a few houses? That's not, that doesn't meet the requirements of value for money. We should be auditing that value for money. And I think we need to have a discussion about how we do it and maybe get some advice from officers and maybe some independent legal advice on from the LGA on how we can audit appropriately that things are going well and that there isn't an abuse in the system here.
I think I would largely agree with you, Councillor Quirk. You prefigured my final verbal comments, which were, though I didn't raise it at the work plan item, I was going to seek your thoughts, and I think you've already read my mind as to the extent to which we should look at this within our work plan in March to see how this has bearing, but also bring out some of the other things around openness and transparency. The reason why I went off and did the research I did around what the government requires of us. And also then, of course, LGA was very, very helpful kind of guidance around this. Still have, where have I got to? Can you tell me which member question I've got to? Is it Councillor Mosdeff's one that I have next? Okay, yes, so Councillor Mosdeff has said, although audit committee members were told that the homes for Ukrainian refugees would be at zero cost to the council, it would appear that a sum in excess of £800,000 has or would be drawn down as a loan to support and part fund this activity. Semicolon, is this true? If it is true, 5 bullet points. Why was audit committee misled? What was the exact value of the loan? Was easy to be supplied by the Public Works Loan Board? What is the interest rate? How will repayments and interest be funded? Before I give my reply, later on, and so this is no criticism of Councillor Mosdell that she hasn't had a chance to respond to me on this, but I was concerned to see a suggestion that this committee may have been misled, and I reviewed the recordings of our last 2 meetings to see if I could find something that might lead to that assertion, and I found I couldn't find something, so I have invited Councillor Mosdell just to explain where she feels that audit committee, as it might have been, audit and governance committee may have been, as she suggests, misled on the predication of the answer to the previous part of her question. It may have been, and I did, and this is where I get into my answer. On reviewing the recording of the Corporate Scrutiny Committee on 7th of November 2023, which I did by listening through quite carefully. Also, I'd note to members that it is possible to take a YouTube video, place it into a free resource online, and get a transcript of those recordings, which I used to some effect to identify where in the recording I needed to be for this answer. But anyway, I did review the recording of the Corporate Scrutiny Committee on 7th November 2023, as well as the Audit and Governance Committee recordings. And I am aware that there was discussion in relation to the funding allocated to support the development of refugee accommodation. It seems that quarterly performance management report 2, capital report commentary caused some confusion. It was interpreted to suggest that the full grant was circa £2 million. This is what I understand from the help that officers were able to give me, which needed to be match funded to the same amount by the council, which led to the assumption that the council would therefore need to borrow circa £2 million to deliver the scheme. I'm told that this is not the case. I'm told that the purchase of the 9 units of accommodation to support refugees on the island is as funded as follows. If you'll bear with me, I won't read out the whole table on that. I am told that following the meeting, this information was shared with the Chair of Corporate Scrutiny and Councillor Mosdell as a direct response to the question. And then there is a lengthy part, bear with me, that's been kindly provided to me by officers. So at the Corporate Scrutiny Committee, the Section 151 officer advised that borrowing provision exists in the capital budget for schemes where viability is established, where the borrowing would not have any ongoing impact on the council's revenue account. In the case for Ukrainian Afghan homes, the balance required from borrowing of £850,000 after grant funding and a £55,000 cash contribution to the council's capital programme could be undertaken without it having an impact on the ongoing revenue position of the council. 3 more paragraphs. Borrowing provision exists in the capital budget for schemes where viability is established. This means that it has been assessed that there is sufficient funding from income streams, in this case net rent, to fund the total costs of borrowing, therefore having no ongoing net impact on the council's revenue account. The loans from the PWLB, the Public Works Loans Board, will only be drawn down at the point that this is required. To date, 5 of their properties have been purchased and the expenditure incurred has been set against the grant-based funding. Therefore, to date, no PWLB loans have actually been drawn down. In practice, borrowing from the PWLB is undertaken at a corporate level based on need as and when the council's overall cash flow requires. Borrowing from the PWLB is not undertaken on a project by project basis. Final paragraph, a lengthy one. When further expenditure for the remaining properties takes place, the remainder of the grant-based funding will be utilised first, and then the council's overall cash flow balances will be considered. And if the council has sufficient cash balances, then this will be utilised in the short term instead of taking the borrowing, as this is more cost effective. That is, the cost of borrowing long term is greater than the loss of interest from using temporary surplus cash balances. This practice is known as internal borrowing. At the time external borrowing is required, the appropriate rates will be determined. At current rates of circa 5.2% for 50-year borrowing and allowing for some variation in this rate, it is considered that net rental income is sufficient to fund the cost of borrowing and to ensure that there will be no ongoing impact on the council's revenue position. So I give that as my answer, but of course it is informed by what officers have provided me as well. But hopefully you'd be assured that I did review recordings and whatever to try to get to the root of this. And hopefully Councillor Mosdell will be able to explain a little more where she might feels that this committee might have had some misinformation or been misled. So that means I've got one more, I believe. It is number 18 from Councillor Spink. How much land, number and area, and in which building assets has the council disposed of or exchanged during this and the last financial years? What is their aggregate value per year, and how many and of what aggregate value have not been fully, open brackets, including value terms, contract parties, etc., close brackets, publicly disclosed? And does this committee believe that hiding the terms of such significant assets that could otherwise be used to provide council rental properties at social rent levels is appropriate, open and transparent? So there's a little bit of duplication here. Under the current governance arrangements, decisions with regard to disposal and use of council assets would sit with the Cabinet, and I will pass this question through to the relevant Cabinet member to provide a detailed response as to the number of values and value of disposal. And then I reproduce what I said before for other questions about the government requirements and the LGA guidance. So there are those 5 questions, some of which are clearly mutually linked. Might have been easier for a single person to ask a more comprehensive set of questions, but I think they are important questions. I have no problem with them coming to this committee. I think they might have been directed elsewhere, particularly by experienced councillors. Generally, I feel there's a no wrong door approach to questions to committees, where that comes from the public who may not know certain things. But at the same time, I have no problem with these coming. And as I said in response to Councillor Quirk, he prefigured my thoughts that we might, as a committee, proactively look at what's been raised here, particularly around openness and transparency, to make sure that we're all properly satisfied that we're meeting at least the minimum levels of government expectation in their in their notes, and also LGA interpretation of best practice around that. So hopefully, colleagues, you're content with what I gave there. I did try to do as much research as possible on this. The final thing I would just note, it is important, I think, for all members to be careful in their language. To suggest a committee has been misled does need to be evidenced, I feel, and I'm hoping that was just a misuse of a word there, because to mislead a committee would be quite a serious situation. I also think words like hiding do come with a certain kind of emotional content that it may be a bit dry and dusty of me, but sometimes I think neutral language to suggest that disclosure or non-disclosure, where there is a statutory basis for that, doesn't necessarily mean whether one is hiding something or other. But it is for each member to decide how they're going to put forward questions. Councillor Churchman, you had your hand up for an oral question.
Yes, just a comment. It still ceases to amaze me how there isn't total transparency. Councils have no money. The government has no money. It all exists on you and me as taxpayers. So therefore, I cannot understand how anything can be hidden behind, or we can't reveal it because it's secret, or it's non-disclosable. I'm sorry, it's taxpayers' money that funds all this lot. So to my mind, everything should be open and transparent. Right, my actual question was, I recently had a constituent lost her bus pass and was told she had to pay £10 to get a renewal. Could somebody please explain to me why, for the very vulnerable elderly people who possibly need the bus service, then have to fork out £10? Thank you, Chair.
On that second question, is anybody able to give a response at this point? Mr. Redland.
I think come back on the second response. We'll come back with an answer on that, Councillor Churchman. Just on the first response, yes, taxpayers' money is quite right, and transparency. However, when we're in a commercial environment and we're operating commercially, we sometimes have to behave like commercial companies, and therefore some things do need to be kept to a certain level of confidentiality because of the nature of those negotiations and the nature of those conversations.
I hope that's helpful. Obviously, you can, Councillor Churchman, you may want to, I think you may want to take that up more with Mr. Rowland and perhaps bring it back at some point. On your first comment, all I can suggest to you is what the government itself set out in its note. Exclusions and exemptions. Authorities should ensure that they do not contravene provisions of sections 100A, 100B or 100F of the Local Government Act 1972, and where information would otherwise fall within one of the exemptions from disclosure, for instance, under the Freedom of Information Act, etc., etc., etc. Other sort of provisions. So government itself is saying to us there are times and types of information that should not be disclosed, and gives a statutory basis for that. So if we were to disclose, we have to be in a very strong position. That said, I will note what government says here. Local authority should start from the presumption of openness and disclosure of information, and I agree with that. and not rely on exemptions to withhold information unless absolutely necessary. That last phrase, I think absolutely necessary, I'm sure has been tested in courts, and I'm sure Mr. Potter, our monitoring officer, would be able to give us chapter and verse on various court cases that have covered that. But I would stress I have sympathy with all those who want to see the greatest possible openness and transparency. But I hope I'm not naive enough to think that everything must be disclosed. Councillor Redrup.
Although I do agree with Councillor Churchman, there is, and I think you said it, that once those particular secretive deals, confidential deals are taken place, and the land or buildings have been sold, there must be a point that such that the public and ourselves can be notified that that's taken place. The secrecy comes to an end, doesn't it? It shouldn't be in place continuously. So I do understand fully when the negotiations are going on. But once that's transpired, surely we should be informed of that.
And I believe those things do get disclosed. I think there are just particular things here. I don't want to read into people's questions, things that I might be able to read into them about particular things. It's for them to identify particular things of concern to them. But I've spent 30 years on and off in local government. There have been many times when it's been very clear to me that there is information that simply cannot be disclosed, and that is why government has set out its guidance. But above all else, Parliament has actually enacted statutes, and that's why I've read out that bit about the regard that we should have to certain sections of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended. So hopefully I've dealt fairly with that. I always want to feel that I've dealt fairly with things like that. And if there are no other questions from members, your best possible question, you're going to speak with Mr. Rowland, but it's and that may be something that your group wants to look at in terms of the budget process as well. There may be a funding process that you could bring forward an amendment on. Saying that. But otherwise, colleagues, thank you for attending this morning, both in this room and online. All it remains for me to do is wish you all a very happy Christmas and an extremely enjoyable New Year, whether that is quiet or raucous. I'm going on the quiet front, but I know some will have a more raucous approach to their enjoyment over the Christmas period. And I'll close the meeting. Thank you. Thank you.